and this dude answered the campground, and I was good. There were like no buildings there. We were gonna like build a retreat center, and there was nothing. We were like talking about building the bathhouse, and I was going there to help build. Speaking of not having enough toilets, I was coming to build the toilet, which gives you a sense of how many we had before that moment. And we hadn't met. Some guy answers, campground manager, and I said, yeah, I'm just there. I'm just here to help. I just want to help build. And he said, this is not. That's fine, we can use your help, it's great, but like, this is a place to practice, and like, do your practice, and like, don't get up early and come try to help us, like, do your practice, and then we'll get to the work, but don't do the work instead of doing the practice, to do the work to do the practice. If you don't do your practice, I think it was like the holiest thing in some ways, it was all downhill from there, and then just a reverence. And one of the best friends, I have ever had, could ever have. It's tough times being like alone in that place that we were, but to have someone to say, to just like, who really understands when you look and say, dude, what the fuck, right? You can't like, I don't think you could really survive the long haul of a personal spiritual practice without that, which is why we would go out of our way to create a series of community events where we can come and listen to friends for a moment, but break bread together and hang out together, because we need community. And Earle is like a totem of community for us, like we really shared community with, and I love you so much. It's just our honor to get to have you in our place, dude. Yeah. We're gonna go sit over there instead of, we had this thing we developed from the last one where we just stared lovingly. But in the end we decided it was awkward.
And there's nothing like, friends who can push your education on yoga philosophy. Yeah. And this fella, he's got just such a wealth of knowledge. And so think about some questions that you can bug him with and debate him on after the fact.
Yeah, yoga center last week. He was my Ashtanga teacher.
Yeah, I did teach some yoga, so we'll start with some yoga. So if you want to stand up, and we'll just move an arm this way. We'll move the other arm this way. We'll move this arm this way, the other arm this way, and now we'll do them in both directions.
I don't think I can.
One arm forward, one arm backwards. And now reverse it. This is the real yoga.
Oh my
All right. Yoga exercise number 2. Seeing as we're here to have community, go and say hi to someone you don't know and give them a high five, or introduce yourself. One more yoga exercise. Pointer finger, left hand, pinky finger, right hand. Ready? Switch. 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 This is really important stuff. Switch. That was abysmal. Terrible. We'll try one different one. Do this for an hour. Okay. Like glasses. Like you're an owl, fingers to the top of your forehead. Everyone good so far? This one's a little easier since the last one was so abysmal. So all you gotta do is flip your glasses. So your fingers are on top, and you're gonna flip them so the fingers are still on top. No, so the fingers are still on the top. Just flip them. All right. That was sketchy. I don't project very well at the back. Is that okay? Can you be in charge of doing this if I get too quiet? Promise? Don't be shy. All right. You can just give me like a sign. Let's begin. We're a third of the way to having potluck, which I know is what we're really here for. But I did want to talk about something constructive. So we'll talk about, it's easy to think of practice and what we do on the mat or on the meditation cushion, but what's practice look like other than that? So that'll be our topic. I had a friend that was teaching in a prison in New Zealand, and she started talking, giving her presentation, and some of the people were getting a little agitated. This was Tenzin Chiki, Petra. And she's like, well, it's prison, people are probably agitated. It's probably not that abnormal. And then this guy got up and he started walking back and forth in the back. And she's like a little uncomfortable, and then he was just like, stop. And she was like, what? And she's like, we don't even know who you are. Like, how can you just come in and start talking at us? And the Maori culture in New Zealand, that, a little bit older generations, they have a moku, a tattoo that, it's kind of who you are. There's different meanings of different parts of the facial tattoo. So part of the tattoo, how many lines shows how many generations you are. Shows what your profession is. It shows your connection to God. It shows what family or iwi you're part of. So there's this very strong part of the culture that even just in their facial tattoo of like who you are first. And so I really learned from that of like, I don't generally like to talk about myself, but I feel like I will because it's a nice starting point. And hopefully we can share some more in a more multi-directional way at the dinner. So, seeing as we're a little bit later than I had planned, I'll do it quick. I was born in Canada. I grew up playing a lot of sports. I had a great family, good community. I went to grade school. I went to high school. I started questioning reality. Like, what's this all about? Why am I here? What's the meaning of life? That seemed to flow into psychedelics and furthering that idea of like finding the limits of consciousness and disillusionment from status quo as I saw it. And so I went to university and that just got more and more. And I felt like there's no meaning of life. Life is inherently meaningless, and that's why everyone wants to give meaning to life, and life really is about having fun. Or that's what I felt like, it's just fun. Because there is no meaning, I might as well have fun. And that didn't mean work, because work wasn't fun. And so I started selling drugs to maximize my free time and minimize my work time. And ended up where all good, criminals go to, Australia. And then I went to New Zealand and I ended up getting arrested. And then it was really wild. It was my search for freedom. I ended up in prison for a couple of years. And ironically, at the same prison that she taught at. And that's where I started doing yoga. And that's where that was my first yoga class, my first meditation, and where I started studying philosophy. And so then I went back to Canada and finished my degree in a very profound degree called leisure studies. Ben always...
Leisure studies? Leisure as in pleasure, not leisure as in seizure.
So then I eventually made my way down to start this retreat center where we studied together for 10 years. And then I left that scene and did some other stuff. Ended up in New York where I programmed for a organization called the Yoga Studies Institute. And so a lot of that to say, that's been 28 years. So I've got some skin in this game of yoga, meditation, philosophy, Buddhism. And so I sometimes reflect, like I'll meet people that it's like, oh wow, yeah, I remember you from 20 years ago. And they're like, yeah, you're still doing that thing? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, I really wish I stuck with it, or I miss it. I really should start doing yoga again, or I should start meditating again. So I reflect a lot about what's carried me through 28 years, like why didn't I drop off, or what keeps me engaged. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today a little bit, was what's the things that we can do that make this thing something we can do longer term, or more, that might be more complete, that's not just on the cushion or not just on the yoga mat. So today, that's what I'd like to do, talk about this idea of, in Tibetan it's called Chilam Ki Namjor. Okay. So just to get some engagement, say Ch, Nam, Ki, Namjor. Chilam Ki Namjor. Okay, it just means like the practice that we do all day long. Okay, what's our all day long practice? What can we do for a practice that's all day long? So we'll talk about that, like what are some components of that? Okay, so that'll be the most of the talk. Maybe have some time for questions, that'll probably happen out there. Maybe do a led meditation, see how much I talk. So far, not so good. So a different word we can use for like daily practice is, what's our sadhana? Sadhana means, comes from a word which means to succeed. And so the daily practice is something that we do that hopefully will make us successful. Right? So with the new year, I think a lot of people have an opportunity to evaluate what are the things that I want to accomplish this year, or what's important to me, or what have I neglected, or what's my plan to do these things to do, which I think will make me happy. And so that idea we could call a sadhana. And I like to do it in terms of something called the 3 horizons. So every year I try to take some time and think of 3 horizons. And that could be in regards to a relationship, or finances, or spirituality, or all of them. And so 3 horizons is the far horizon. What's the end result look like? So if it's related to my meditation practice, what's that end result going to look like? Or if I want to buy a house, it's like, what's that ideal house that I want? Or whatever. What's the end goal? What's that far horizon? What's the finished product going to look like? And then there's a middle horizon, which is like 3 to 5 years. In 3 to 5, if I want to get to that far horizon, what's the 3 to 5 year horizon going to look like? So if it's to have a house, then in 3 to 5 years, it's like, I don't know, I've saved X amount of money for my down payment. Something like that. If it's meditation and my goal is to be here, then what's it going to look like in 3 to 5 years? And then the first horizon is, what am I doing today? Right? What am I doing on the day by day or the week by week that's going to lead me to the second and the third horizon? And so a sadhana, or daily practice, can be the thing. And so those 3 horizons need to line up. And so the important thing is like, what's the point of a sadhana? One of the things is it helps us line up those 3 points. Because what I find is I have that end goal in mind. I can kind of think of what it's going to look like in 3 to 5 years. And then I wake up in the morning and I'm looking at, tonight there's big UFC fights. And I know first thing in the morning I'm like checking the UFC, looking at the hockey scores. And then in my day, if I'm looking at my social media 72,000 times, all of those things become my daily practice. And that's not pointed in the direction of my 3 horizons. My goal isn't to become a UFC commentator. I don't need to be looking at spending that much time reading about UFC, because that's not here. And I want to be here. Checking the hockey scores incessantly that's not my direction, that's not my goal. It's fine. But if it's my daily practice is leading here and I want to be here, it's not functional. And so we can take some time in the beginning of a year or whatever to kind of look at what are the components of my sadhana, my daily practice, which is going to line up with my second and third horizon. Does that make sense so far? So then, how much stuff do I cut out?
Don't worry about it, just go.
Yeah. So it functions in a couple ways. It keeps me online. It keeps me from getting distracted by meaningless activity or trying to find happiness in things that don't really work. Like an overly materialistic world. Like I did a lot of youth work, and I ran into some stats, and one of the stats was the kids in America, this is probably 10 years ago, kids in America have more technology, more money, more access to wealth, more free time. Just generally they're economically winning over any group of youth anywhere in the world at any point in history. In America, we won. They're also the most suicidal, medicated, violent, and incarcerated anywhere. And so there's this problem of like, in this search for happiness, what do we see in the world? What do we do? What do we think might make us happy? It's so, like, what are we going to do? Give them more stuff? Happiness isn't happening, so what's the answer? More stuff. House sizes in the US have tripled in the last 30 years. And families are shrinking. Right? Why do we need a bigger house with less people? It's because stuff. We just fill our houses with stuff. Why? Because that's this attraction to thinking that if I get that thing, it will make me happy. And so there's this paradigm of something called hedonic happiness and eudaimonic happiness. And hedonic happiness, lots of ways we can define it, but one way would be the stuff we get from the world. And hedonic doesn't mean getting wasted necessarily. It could be that. I'll be happy if I go out with my buddies and getting loaded. That's a form of hedonic happiness. But hedonic happiness can also be, I think of it when my dad came home from work. He had to take the bus to work. It took like probably 45 minutes, an hour, both ways. And me and my brother, I have a brother that's 11 months older. We had this big front window in the front of our house. And we knew it was like 5 o'clock, like Dad's coming home, and we could hear the bus coming up the hill. And so we'd be sitting there and we'd be waiting for the bus. And the bus would come, and sometimes he didn't get off. We'd have to wait 20 minutes for the next one. And then he'd come walking down the hill, and he'd come walking at the driveway, and then he'd come in the door, and we'd kind of jump on him. And I didn't realize it, but I'd look back and I'd think, that must have been so cool. Like, I try to imagine, like, a long day of work, and then coming home and having your kids jump on you. How cool that would be, you know? I think that's hedonic happiness too. It's okay. And then, you know, a really interesting class would be like the Buddha's first noble truth is like, that's suffering. Right? So super interesting philosophy of like, oh, well, even that's suffering because it ends. Or because we put our happiness in that and then one day it just doesn't work. So there's this form of, this idea of hedonic happiness, trying to find happiness in things. And then eudaimonic happiness, instead of happiness we get from the world, it's happiness we get from giving to the world, what we bring to the world. And so when we look at end-of-life studies, I read this end-of-life study that people that self-identified as happy. They said, well, what makes you happy? And then they did this big study and they came up with 3 things. Don't quote me in this. I haven't been able to corroborate this, but I love it because it fits my worldview. First, having a good sense of morality, having a moral system that they live by. Whatever it was, didn't matter, but it was a set of values that they adhered to. Second was some form of mindfulness practice. And third was having some sort of worldview or meaning in life, some sort of explanation of what's the point, what's the meaning of life. And so those were the things and so no one at the end of life was like, yeah, I wish I had more stuff. You know, I really wish I had another job so that I could have paid for more stuff and had a bigger house for, no one says that. Right? That's not what research shows. So why am I talking about that? Our sadhana should be a thing that we fill with values or activities that aren't superficial or stupid. You know, like my daily sadhana is full of all kinds of stupid things. So what I want to do is to take 10 minutes. I'm gonna ask that you get into groups of 3 or 4 or 2, I don't really care, and discuss what are elements of your daily sadhana as we cruise into 2024. What are some things that you want to have that are important in your daily sadhana? And it could be, well, it could be anything, it doesn't matter. Oh my God, we're gonna have to do workshops. I just wanted to sit here and listen. Anyone derive any insights from that they wanted to share? Succinctly.
I think I got from it the importance of community and fellowship.
Cool, awesome. Anyone else?
I'm trying to just say succinctly mind, body, spirit. So like mind, learning, spirit to me, community, body, exercise, and eating well, and trying to work on like character and being a better person.
Cool. Good. Yeah, nice.
I would say I got some good advices to journal, and I know that sounds easy, but I have a hard time writing and journaling. But I think it's a really good idea to pursue that a lot more and make it a dedication as opposed to a kind of an optional thing if I feel like it.
Awesome example. Yeah. It's very concrete and specific.
I'm an engineer.
really respond this exercise, I think this is gonna like just initiate a bunch of thoughts over myself. I feel like I have gotten kind of like more complicated as I grow as an adult and now being a mom, and in all this push for like achieving a goal, and then it's never enough, right?
Yeah.
So I feel that even like have that thing of like, okay, what do you want? What is that thing that you want? It kind of stresses me out too. So, so it's a lot. I think it's a very complex thing, and especially now with more mature mind and more complex and understanding feelings way deeper now, it's like a very complex thing. So I appreciate this because
I think it's a really good point. Like when we get so goal oriented, especially about spiritual things, like, do I really need to have a spiritual goal now too? Like, I have to have a meditation goal, I have to have a yoga goal, I have to have like, and I think we should not have that add stress to our life, but the mind does work well with goals, but also it's not so much, can we let go of the achieving of the goal and focus on the process and have this as a help for the process and enjoy the, like Ben and I were talking about this the other day of like, I feel ripped off because I never was told to enjoy the process of meditation. It's like, here's the goal, which we never seem to reach. And so it's just always adding this stress and this tension, and I was never allowed to just enjoy where I'm at. So I think it's a really, really important point that it's not about creating more disappointment or more reasons to feel bad about ourselves. It's actually the opposite. It's to give our lives some solid direction, but also permission to enjoy that process. So I think that's a very, very important point. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. It made me think of what do we need to subtract out of our lives? If you're going to add something, you know, this, in America we tend to just pile it up and add it up and just stress ourselves out.
Yeah.
You have to subtract an equal amount.
Yeah. Cool. Did you guys hear that in the back there?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Cool. Let's push on for a second. Okay, so what I wanted to do was I wanted to share something that our teacher shared with us. He gave us 6 points that I found super useful in my life. Like 6 elements that I tried to incorporate into my sadhana that I wanted to talk about and share. And, you know, if some of it, and some of it, you know, community is one of them. So several people have already identified them. So then if you like them, great, you can think about them, and if you don't, you can leave them behind. That's fine. First, some sort of study. So there's this thing in yoga as a yoga teacher that you're not supposed to do what? Date your yoga student. But as a student, I dated my yoga teacher. It was the best thing for my yoga practice. She had to go to yoga every day, which meant I had to go to yoga every day, and she taught Ashtanga, which meant we had to be at the studio at 6, which means at 4:30 I had to get up to make her chai, because that was the deal. So I would get up and make chai, and then come back, give her the chai, and then I would take 20 minutes to sleep. And she would take 20 minutes and drink chai and study. And then we'd go to class, and then we'd be driving home, and I'd be like, damn, that was a cool class. Where'd you hear that? Or where'd you learn that? She's like, yeah, I read it this morning. I was like, oh yeah. And then I noticed like her side of the bed, the bookshelf thing, the bedside, these books would just like come and go. You know, it was only 20 minutes. And my side never had books. And I took those 20 minutes to sleep. And over the course of years, like I just saw how a little bit of study every day, how the cumulative amount of that, how much she improved her life. Learning Ayurveda, studying something that inspired her. It doesn't matter what, I don't think it matters. It's like, start the day by putting something in your mind that's not UFC fighting immediately, or the phone necessarily. Like, put something poetry, put something engineering, it doesn't matter. Like, whatever it is that's inspiring, put that into your heart first thing in the day for 15 minutes. And in yoga, it's called Swajaya, and it mainly is, well, you could say that, you know, it's spiritual study. What's the nature of reality? What's the purpose of life? What's the meaning of life? But really, like, what's inspiring to me? What's cool that I can start my day inspired? And I think that's been really great for me. Second thing, we had a couple of people identify this as meditation, or mindfulness, or attention training. What was that quote you shared today about attention?
Ezra Klein's show, latest episode, he said he's more and more convinced that attention is the most important human faculty, that in the end of your life, when you look back and see what was your life, it is the sum total of the things you paid attention to.
Yeah, so if at the end of life, it's that accumulation of things we've paid attention to. So if we want to get better at attention and controlling the mind, you know, maybe one way to do that would be to learn how to do this thing called meditate. And, you know, meditation is it's a skill. It's not going to just magically happen. We can't just value it and not do it and think that somehow our mind will get more focusable and controllable. So there's for me, it was, I kind of thought that in my mind, like I could just sit my ass down and meditate and I would get better at it. And it really wasn't like that. I got worse at it. And I thought I was supposed to meditate for a certain amount of time, which was an hour. That's what people had told me, you should meditate for an hour. So I tried to meditate for an hour, and I just trained myself how to fall asleep sitting up. And you know, I would go study with a meditation teacher, and we were meditating one day, John Yates, and so we meditate, and right away I'm falling asleep. At the end of the hour, 40 minutes, whatever we were doing, he's like, you're just falling asleep every time you meditate. Are you tired? It's like, nope, not at all. Wide awake, had tons of sleep. And so he made me meditate standing up. So we'd be in a room of everyone sitting down and nicely meditating, and there's one joker in the back with the stupid hat on, having to meditate standing up. And he got me to do a lot of walking meditation. And I would, even in 3-year retreat, I would sometimes walk on the roof or on a high railing to keep my mind alert. And so, you know, what I learned was that I needed some instruction. And, you know, there's, 9 stages of meditation. There's a very traditional teaching, 9 stages that every single mind goes through. We're going to encounter the same problems. There's very common solutions. And we can learn a roadmap to how to make the mind more concentrated. And so as anybody knows that's tried to do yoga or wanted to have a consistent yoga or meditation practice, as an example, what's the first problem we have when we want to meditate or do yoga?
The mind fluctuates.
Mind wanders is one of the second ones.
The one of those lazy.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to fucking do this. You know, it's great for 2 weeks, and it's like, I don't want to get out of bed. Right? And it's called laziness. In Tibetan, the word is lelo, And so I've been thinking a lot about that. And I don't think that is true. It's an obstacle to practice in the morning. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to do it. I don't want to meditate. I want to do yoga. But I think it's more than that. And I think it's related to this three horizons idea. It's like, it's not the laziness in the moment. It's the laziness of prioritization in my life. And so I've got these things that I've identified that I want to do. Let's say meditation. But I have to, I have to get up and I have to shower, breakfast. I definitely have to have coffee. Work's got to happen somewhere. And then I have a break later in the day. So I'll do the meditation there. From 2 to 2:30, I have a break there, I'll meditate. And then the day kind of goes, and then maybe the meeting happens, or called in, or I just ate, or it's easy to, and then I don't meditate. Or I'm tired, it's the end of the day, or whatever. And for me, a big change was reversing that. Instead of trying to fit meditation into my life, here's my priorities that I've identified. Blah, 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 blah. And now I have to fit my work. So my meditation's going to happen here, and my yoga is going to happen here. And so my work or my life or my other things have to fit in there. So instead of fitting my things that I've identified as important into my life, I'm going to fit my life into the things that are important. And that was a huge, huge shift for me. And it meant that I quit jobs and didn't take jobs, or took jobs that were less paying, or meant that I didn't save up to buy a house. These were the things that, and it doesn't mean that the things that are important can't be family, saving up for a house, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't mean that. It's a little bit of a false distinction of spiritual practice and life. Right? Ideally, we are integrating those. But it's like identifying the things that are important to me, and then fitting the logistics of my life into that, instead of fitting the things that are important to me into like the logistics of life. And that was a big shift in how I live my life, and a big shift in living the things that were important to me. And it's an ongoing process, obviously. Meaning that for years we can get just, days, months, weeks, years, we can get a little sidetracked. It's okay. Atta Yoga Anushasana, the first line of the Yoga Sutra. Atta means now. It's one of my favorite word in the Yoga Sutra is the first one. Atta, it's like practice. We can practice now. Oh, you didn't do your yoga yesterday? It's okay. You had a shitty morning, you yelled at your kids, it's okay. And now we can practice yoga atta, now. Always now. Always we can practice now. Atta yoga. We can do yoga now. Which means yoga is not something you do for 60 minutes or 90 minutes. Right? How long is your yoga practice? All day long. Right? Big picture yoga. It's atta. It's like there's always an opportunity to practice compassion, always an opportunity to practice love, always an opportunity to do yoga. And that's the idea of Chulamki Nelja, this all day long practice. What are the things that I'm doing off the cushion that allow me to practice all day long? So, my suggestions, my teacher's suggestions that worked for me, have some sort of study, some sort of svadhyaya, something that I'm waking up and putting in my heart that's uplifting first thing. My experience, it's not my phone. It doesn't work. Second for me has been meditation. These aren't in order. Second component, meditation. What's the biggest factor in life that prevents us from reaching our highest levels of capacity for single point of concentration? What's the one biggest obstacle, according to Huberman podcast? What's that?
Our phones?
Nope.
Believe in yourself.
No, give me an interesting answer, but no. I mean, I'm giving his list. No. It's a lack of sleep, which is such a pandemic in our world. So wherever our ultimate capacity is for concentrating the mind, the biggest factor, according to him, that prevents us from achieving that is a lack of sleep, which means getting 80% of what we need 5 nights a week or something. And if we aren't getting the sleep, we won't be able to achieve that highest level of being able to concentrate the mind, which I thought was fascinating, especially if you're a single parent. Okay, third used to be my least favorite, and now it's my favorite, and it's ethics or morality. Having a sense of what's my core ethical values, which used to just freak me out. Like, it was the thing I didn't want. And that was my whole view of the world, was life is meaningless, so people are trying to give meaning, and that mostly meant some sort of vision of ethical purity that I was like, you can keep that to yourself. You know, I'll figure my own values out for myself. And, they weren't necessarily great. But that's the third one, and so now I really, post high school, post university, it's been such a big, cool part of my life is to figure out what are my core principles. What are the values that I really want to stand firm in? And what's important to me? And if I never take the time to determine that concretely, I'll never stick to them, because I don't even know what they are. I might have some vague ideas, but if I don't really kind of gain clarity on what's my own personal core values, what's my ethical way of life, what do I want it to be, what do I stand firm in? Because then I have something I can hold myself to. And so, at first I think I didn't even know what that was. And so I ran into these systems of philosophy that, like Buddhism, that has a very, very defined moral code. 10 virtues, 10 non-virtues, 5 lay vows, 8 one-day vows. How many bodhisattva vows?
48.
47.
There's a lot. I think there's 253 that I have. Something like that. It's a lot. And it starts very general and it gets very refined. It could be 10 commandments. It could be the 5 yamas and niyamas, which are, seeing as we're in a yoga studio, 5 yamas. Anybody?
Flow. I was asking if this says things to take up and things to give up.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot,
Yeah, that's a nice division.
I don't know, is that like your story?
Yeah, yamas and niyamas, you could say that.
Okay.
Do you remember any of the things to give? What are some of the things, make them up, things to give up?
Things to give up.
Why am I straight?
Yeah.
Okay, no hate. Be kind. Is that one of that's an answer?
Yeah, those are pretty great starting points.
Thomas?
Emma? Yeah, help me out.
Thomas? Spiritual worship? Is that spiritual worship?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All 5. 1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You got them?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Cool. You want to do it in English?
Non-violence, truth, not stealing, non-attachment.
Some form of sexual purity.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's a beautiful starting point, and we can learn from great thinkers, great religions, philosophies to adopt a moral code. Oh yeah, those sound like 5 pretty good ideas. Don't fuck people, or don't screw people around, don't swear in yoga class. And then there's some, Will Duncan was in speaking, I don't know how many people came to his class, but he collected a list of people's moral codes. And I think Thomas Edison was one that had a very refined moral code that was very cool. And I think that's great. It's really nice it's really good for us to access those and to see, which of those work and which of those don't work. What do we want to adopt? What calls to my heart? Start to identify what my personal moral code is. So, what I would like to do is pass around a bunch of words and have you look at them. Because I think when we think about moral codes, we go to those very immediate ones. Don't kill people. Don't steal from people. Don't lie to people. Don't have sex with people you shouldn't be having sex with. And those are great. But do they call to my heart? Or are there other things that call to my heart more that we can then add to the moral code? And so I'd like you to take 3 minutes, look over the list, find 3 that you are attracted to keeping as part of your sadhana, part of a core value. If you want to add your own to that list, that's great. We're going to do this in pairs of 2. Okay? Pairs of 2. Take a few minutes. I'll give you 3 minutes. You'll pick your top 3 or make up your top 3. Then, with your partner, you'll give them the top 1 that you chose and why. Okay? So 3 minutes just to kind of have a look at them and see which ones they are. Anyone surprised themselves with something that was like, oh yeah, that's a value that I didn't really think about?
Well, I'll say mine was pretty simple. It's love. And that's very difficult. And as I was saying, for the environment that I work in, which is very engineering, high pressure, lives depend on my success, it's hard to be open and understanding with people and a nice exchange of ideas and to allow a level of trust that I have faith that you're making the right decision. It's more of, no, I know what's right and we have to go this way. So that's a little bit more difficult to bring to my work. So, yeah. Gotta work on it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine were gratitude, excitement, and love.
Did that surprise you at all? That's great. Means you've identified things and. Anyone else? Yeah.
Mine were common humanity, integrity, and faith.
Can I ask what common humanity is to you?
To me, is treating everyone like we're 100% equal across the board, like we're all connected, we all share something. There's no reason for me to act as though I'm better than you. We're all connected. You're part of me, I'm part of you. I see you. And it's not just saying, oh, hey, how are you? It's actually taking the time to look and understand and see people for who they really are. And that's kind of what my overall perception is.
That's beautiful. Anyone else? All right. So what's our list so far?
Self-study, svadhyaya.
Yeah, some study, meditation. Some sort of ethical values, defined moral system. It's like, what are my core values? Oh, and then so once we define them, then what? What's the next step? And the next step is ideally to keep them.
Practice them daily.
Yeah, and so we share a practice of journaling that. So stopping throughout the day and being like, how am I doing in this? So if I'm focused on, like, for me, sometimes I'll just identify one thing that I really want to work on, like criticizing others. I mean, not criticizing others. And then I'll be like, okay, how am I doing that? And then a couple times in the day, just stopping and being like, oh yeah, I totally mentally criticized that person. Okay, great. I recognize that, I can accept that, I can let that go, but then I can also think of the opposite. When did I praise somebody? And then I do something that's like training myself in the opposite. So that when I catch myself criticizing, I'll immediately try to think of 3 good things about them. Okay. Yeah, they're a bit of, but they're also this, this, and this. And so I'm training my mind out of the glass half empty to glass being totally full. Training my mind to be the opposite of the things that I've identified that I don't want to be. Right? So I've got this code of ethics. When I fall down, it's okay. I have a list I can push myself back up against of my core values. Like, it's how I want to be. It's how I want to walk through the world. It's a process. And then when I fall down, it's okay. I'll do something to make up. Try to train my mind to do something to make up for it.
You have a hand.
What's that?
There's a hand.
There's a hand. Oh, yes.
I was thinking it's very interesting you talk about that, because if you go to somebody and say, give me 10 things you're really mad about, most of us would spit out, I don't have a nice car, I didn't have a great breakfast today, I was fighting with my mom. Now flip it around and say, now you have 5 seconds to say 10 things you're really thankful for, or you should be thankful for.
Yeah. I do that
It's really, you're meant to really think of all the negative, or, and it's really a mind shift to try to think of all the positive stuff, and that does change how you think about things.
For sure. And that's why mind training is so important. There's something called the negativity bias. That's exactly that.
Yeah.
We're hardwired to do that. Which is really crazy. Yeah. Yeah, cool, thanks. So I track that. Formally think of what it is, and then find some way to help me keep on track. Yoga, we're all in a yoga studio. I won't go, that's why we're here. That's been an integral part of my sadhana, the things that point me in the direction of where I want to go. I found that it's just been something that integrates a whole bunch of, physically, it's kind of the same way you said, physically, mentally, spiritually. A couple people said community. I've learned way more in community than I ever did in classrooms. I get way more inspiration from community, way more learning than class is important. Having teachers is great. But the strength of my spiritual life has always been community. And so what a beautiful thing for you to create a space to bring us together to share in that community. Every retreat I've ever led or been part of, when we go around at the end, what was the best part for you? The majority is like just being with people and sharing ideas and being in community. As a teacher, it's a little bit depressing. Because it's not like, oh yeah, what you said was really cool. It's like being around people. It's so nice. And the value of teaching, you can see, is partly that. It's like satsang, it's bringing people together. And then sharing in that teaching and having that opportunity to talk about it. Sharing those ideas. It's like the teaching is the spark, but the fire is like the community. How many we got so far?
What's number 4?
4 for me was yoga, 5 was community. 6, we'll do the last one. I'll say a sense of service. In the sense of being part of something that's bigger than myself. And I think it's been one of the big things for me. Like, there's this idea of, I don't know, like you can study and we get this idea of like help all beings or help everybody, or be a bodhisattva, live your life for the sake of others. And I love that idea. Like, it sounds great. But there's a lot of people. Like and it feels kind of intimidating. Okay, love everybody, serve everybody. Because then I see what I do. It reminds me of this story of when I was at Sarah Cicero's house, and a friend of ours. And I just gave him this amazing talk on how you should love everybody and be a bodhisattva, and here's the text, and I'll explain it, and read the Sanskrit, and left the teaching that I had just given feeling so good about myself, and walked down, took the elevator down all of 4 stories, all the way across the street, went to the cafe, and there's 2 things I love right now in life. One is coffee, one is chai, and I've, wanted it both. And so I ordered a shot of espresso, and I ordered a chai, and it was loud, and this young Australian guy was all into being his barista, and was very energetic, and went and made my chai, and then made my espresso, and then hands them to me, and then he poured my espresso, and I was like, I didn't say anything, but everything about me was like, you're an idiot. You just ruined both of those things. And I was just like, just given this brilliant talk about how nice, you all should be super nice and love everybody. And 5 minutes later, when my barista puts my shot of espresso in my chai, I'm like, you're an idiot.
It's an extension of not loving yourself.
Yeah. And so, if I can't, and it just feels so hopeless. Like, how am I going to be nice to everybody? Like, I only see, I don't know, it just gets so discouraging. If I can't be nice to a barista after giving a talk on kindness, I'm going to love all beings. And a friend of mine said, she's like, here's what she does. She said, see the totality of people as everybody on the bus. Imagine you're on a subway car or a bus, like you were sharing. Like, you go on the bus, there's 30 people on it, they represent 8 billion people. And you don't get to leave the bus. Like, you're on this bus with those 30 people for eternity. What would that be like? Like, could you be nice to everybody? And so I thought a lot about that. Like, I would directly see how my crappy mood affects everybody on that bus. I live in New York. No one gives a if I walk down the street in a bad mood. Nobody cares. Nobody notices. But if I'm on a bus with 30 people, I would see how my crappy mood affects other people. I'd be inclined to take care of people. I think I could like 30 people. And if I saw somebody being abused, I'd do something. If I saw somebody that didn't have food and I had food, I'd share it. If I saw a kid that didn't have what they needed, I'd try to make sure they had what they needed. If I saw elderly people that were standing up, I'd give them a seat. 30 people is doable. I can do that, right? But then isn't it like that? Like, how many people do I see in a day, meaningfully? It's not that many. Like, I have meaningful interactions in a normal day with about 5 people. And if I could just imagine that, so effectively for me, everybody in the world is the people that I interact with today. It's not that many. It's not 8. I don't have to be nice to 8 billion people today. All I have to do is be nice to the people that I see. And it's not that many. It's not, and then it's like, it's still more doable. I can do that. I could be nice to everybody too. And then, we try and, usually the 5 people most of them are my friends. I'm still a bit of had this one of them. But it, it's like, that's the practice. I can do that. We're all on the same bus. We're not getting off. We're all on the same bus.
I have to ask you one more question. All these changes that you're talking about, you take a process, right? And it's a steady step to making these self-improvements. Someone like Seth Godin talks about, we as humans, it's real easy to make these changes for the first week or two because we sometimes see these improvements. The trick is that you start to see, it starts to decrease, and that's really probably the most important part, because getting on the other end is the most important. Right? You see a dip, is what they call it, and they're returning your investment of all these positive things that you're receiving. What do you do to get past that spot? Because if you're like, well, let me just revert back to me to my normal form because that's more comfortable, and never quite make it past that.
I'm glad you asked that. That brings us to the last part of the talk. But in a general sense, my sadhana changes, right? Because some practices are going to be really great for a while, and then I'll meditate on a certain thing. And while it's really juicy, that's awesome, but then I'll get bored of it, and then maybe I have to meditate on a different object. Or I'll have a different Chilam King Melndra practice. I'll have a different meditation object off the cushion for a while. And that'll work really well for me. And then it won't. So, one of the practices that worked really well for me, I call it harvesting joy, and it's to deal with the negativity bias. We have this part of our brain, the amygdala, that's constantly on the lookout for problems in the environment. As an evolutionary part of our brain, we're looking for problems, and it contributes to needing whatever the ratio is, 10 compliments to 1 criticism, because we'll cling to that because we're genetically predisposed to doing that. And so one of my practices might be stopping any point in my day and just noticing. And I'll go through the senses. Is there something in my environment that makes me happy, joyful, immediately right here, right now? And I'll just, maybe the walking thing at the crosswalk is the hand, or the red line. I'll just be like, okay, is there something that I can smell or taste or touch or hear that makes me happy? Is it? And then it's like trying to train myself to notice when I walk from the shade into the sun on a cold day. Oh, that's nice. Or on a hot day from the sun into the shade. Or I'll just notice the sound of children's laughter. Or I remember doing this practice and walking to work and outside of the studio, and someone had planted some flowers. They were really beautiful. And they weren't fresh. And I knew I've walked by these for at least a month without noticing them. They weren't planted yesterday. But I was doing this practice of, okay, I'm just going to recognize something in my senses that I enjoy. And I learned that it's been such a powerful practice for me that I don't have to necessarily create or find happiness. I just have to recognize it. And I did this very, very consistently for a couple of years. And I never, ever found a situation where I couldn't find something. There was always something in my immediate experience that was joyful, if I just stopped long enough to pay attention to it. And so that practice lasted a long time. I milked that, I mined that for 2 years. But I wanted to share one other one today that is another practice that I got a lot out of for years. And has been a big part of my daily sadhana, my daily routine.
Is this the 6th thing?
The 6th was service, in the sense of finding something bigger than me to serve So that could be an organization. It could be this idea of being nice to people. It could be very tangibly coming and helping out at a yoga studio. But something that I used to listen to a band called Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, and I just recognized that was my life. Me First and the Gimme Gimmes. Gimme, gimme, gimme. So it's something that takes me out of that. That takes my focus from me onto other people. That's how I relate to service. So the practice is called Pemba Gitopa. Say Pemba.
Pemba.
Ki. Topa. Top means power. Ki means of. Pemba. Pemba means to project. Yeah. So it's like taking a bow and arrow and projecting the arrow is Pemba. So it's the power of projection. It's part of a bigger practice, but it means start your day by projecting yourself in a way that's defeating the me first and the gimme gimme attitude. That's taking us away from me into starting to think of other people. Super great for me when I can do a practice when I'm still in bed. This happens to be one of those. Wake up, and then simple. Thinking of 3 things I can do for somebody else today. 3 additional things. So if you happen to have a kid named Ezra and you generally feed that kid, that's great. You should continue to feed that kid. It doesn't count. 3 additional things. And I found I would write it in the same book that I would track my ethical principles, or I would forget it and I wouldn't do it. And it sounds easy. Yeah, 3 things to do for someone else. And it's not saving somebody from a burning building. It's not like that. But what I found when I did it month after month, I would get, I don't know what the 3rd one is. I'm not gonna go out today, I'm gonna be at home. And it would be frustrating to be like, I've gotta get up, I do have things to do. I'm like, I'm not leaving my bed until I think of 3 things. And so I had this fallback of like, I'll just call my mom. And she likes it when I call, and so my mom and my relationship radically changed because I couldn't think of 3 stupid things to do for someone else. I was like, I'll just call my mom. And but it was very powerful for me to train my mind to stop constantly thinking about me. And then they're small. They're just small little things. And so that's another example of harvest joy. Recognize the beauty of the things around you. Pemba Gito. 3 things to do for someone else. And then we fill our sadhana, our all day long practice, with these little things that keep us pointed towards our core values or towards our goals that are in line with our 3 horizons. That's it. That's the, and it doesn't need to be my list. Everyone, it's your sadhana. It's your daily practice, your horizons. Those are some ideas, and you can adopt some or not. Dalai Lama finished one of his talks once. He's like, if you like what I said, that was great. If you didn't, that's great. You can just forget it all. That's fine. But I think it's a good time as we enter 2024 to kind of reevaluate. Yoga is bigger than coming to a studio. It's, Hatha yoga. What's my practice now? How can we have a bigger view of my practice? What's our practice after that? What's our sadhana that's going to take us through the day in a way that's aimed at what we believe in and what we stand up for, and what we want to, who we want to be. afterwards as a process and as a goal. Okay. Thanks for playing around and being so energetic in discussions and sharing. And thank you guys for providing this space. And thank you all for bringing food. With no further ado, or maybe a little further ado, we'll
barely.
do that and then go break bread.